these texture points or UV points, see what it's doing? It's mapping or showing what the texture is immediately underneath. So if I grab all these texture points and went to the scale tool and made it smaller and moved it around, you can see it's only focusing or showing one part of the image. So when you make adjustments in this space, that has a correlating effect on how the texture fits or is mapped onto the object. Does that make sense? Okay. So in this case, I don't need that anymore. So in this case, that texture is covering, or that mapping is covering the whole texture, so we're fine. So now what I'm going to do, because we might not get through all of this, but I'll show you that technique that I mentioned before about using transparency in textures to give you a sense of detail. That is avoiding, extra modeling that you need to do. So we'll start off with maybe the chicken. So that is a chicken, or it will be, but it's a polygon plane. So the first thing I'm going to do, because it's got the gray default material, the first thing I'm going to do on the road to texturing this is assigning a new material, like we did before. So assigning material. Again, I'll choose another matte type of surface called a Lambert. As soon as I do that, it opens up the attribute editor. Again, good idea to rename the materials. So rather than Lambert 3, I'll just call it chicken. Don't like the word chicken. It sounds like something you eat. I'll say hen. There we go. Okay, so now we can go in and change the color like before, but again, like before, we don't want a color. We want to actually add a texture. So what we do is in the color channel, go across to the checker, select that, click on the little file utility, and like before, click on the yellow folder, and that opens up directly in the source images folder where all your textures, your images are kept. We want to go and select, okay, so I'll select this one first, which is just a picture off the internet. Okay, so first thing we need to notice is that it's not transparent. And what's the other thing that we can notice in this image? Something that we picked up on that plane that I showed you before about the texture not covering, or the object not covering the whole texture. So what's missing with this chicken picture? Its tail. So where do we go to fix it? The UV editor. So I have it here. So you can see if I turn the image off, you can see where it's cropping it. Okay, if I go to UVs, okay, wrong way, but you can sort of see what happens. So I just move these points until it covers the whole picture. Actually, if I move this outside here, what do you think will happen? If I move these arrows or these points further out here, any guesses to what happens? There you go, multiple chickens. And if I do it this way, multiple chickens. Oh, there's 9 of them now. Anyway, that technique is really good when you want to create a pattern or tile a texture, but we'll deal with that another time. Okay, so that's fine. I've adjusted the texture points, so everything looks fine in here. So what would we want to do now with this chicken? We don't want the white, do we? We want it transparent. We want it to look like the chicken's cut out. Yeah. So what we do is we now have to go into Photoshop. So it's this one. So I'll open this image. I've actually already got one here. Actually, I'll load this one and I'll show you how to actually do it in Photoshop. So this one's already got the background cut out. So I'll go and replace that one that I've got here. Material attributes. So to replace the texture, see this little link here, this arrow shows that material's got a texture on it. You can see the preview here. If I click on that, again, it previews the texture that's on it. But if I want to change the texture, like change this to the a Targa version, and I'll explain when I'm in Photoshop why it needs to be a Targa version. Open that, and now you can see that that chicken is transparent. Still a polygon plane, but because in Photoshop we've got a transparency active, in Maya it looks as if it's cut out. Okay, so it looks like it's a flat chicken, but cut out. Yep. So how do we do it in Photoshop? So what we need to do is open this in Photoshop. There it is. So what we want to do is make just the chicken visible, but get rid of the background. okay, to create that transparency. So the one way of doing it in Photoshop is go to your Magic Wand tool. Now it'll be easier to select the white background first and then invert it because the white background is just white rather than selecting all the detail in the chicken. So I'll select the background. Now that tolerance should be 0 because I don't want the white selected here. That should be all right. So I've selected the white. So what would we want to do now? What part of this whole picture do we want? The chicken. So I've selected the background, the white background. So that's better. So what do we do now? Selected the white background. If we want to flip the selection, does anyone know how to do that in Photoshop? Or invert the selection? You've made a selection which is the white. I go to select inverse. So now it's selected the actual picture of the chicken itself. Yep. Once we've got that, we go select save selection, just go OK. And if you look here in the channels section of Photoshop, you can see as soon as I've done that, it's created an extra channel. So it had the RGB here, the red, green, and blue, but it's actually created this black and white one here as well. This gives us the transparency information. So given the black is, well, which one refers to what? So the black refers to what's missing or what's been cut out. The white refers to what is still visible. Okay, so black in the alpha channel means that's going to be see-through or invisible when we take it into Maya. The white is visible. Okay, so that's all we need to do in Photoshop is create that transparency information. Oh, did I miss on the in-between legs here? I think I did. That's all right, I'll leave it. You'll see it in Photoshop, in Maya anyway. So what I do now is save this, but because it's got the transparency information, and this image was originally a JPEG, we need to actually now save it as a target because we want to keep this transparency information because the JPEG format doesn't save or retain the transparency. Okay, since we've got the transparency, I'll save it now as a target. I'll just call it just something a bit different, chicken 2. Again, it's going to go in the source images folder, 32-bit pixel, just leave that the default. Yep, come on. And now in Maya, I'll go back to material attributes. I'll go to the color channel again, but this time I'm going to browse and select the one that I just did. What did I call it again? I've forgotten. Chicken 2, was it? There it is. See, it's got the white bit there. Open it, and there it is. It looks like an egg. Yeah, so you can see where I've missed that. It's still the back of the image showing, but everywhere else, it's sort of see-through. Yep. So again, that technique is really useful, and I'll show once more, and then I might pause that recording because it's already almost half an hour, and I'll do it in 2 parts perhaps. But I'll go through the same process with this, and then just to save time, I reckon, that should give you a good idea of what you need to do. Perhaps you can do the rest of this texturing yourself. So let's just do this fence texture as well on this cube. So what's the first thing we need to do if we want to put a particular texture on this object? Yep, we want to change or replace the default grey material with a new one. Again, right click on it, assign, oops, up there, assign new material. Again, I'll just do another matte type of material called a Lambert. Color channels come up, but we don't want a color, we want a texture, so click on the checker. Click on the file icon, browse through the yellow folder, and we want this one. But you can sort of see I've already got the transparent one. There we go. Same process as before with the chicken. Originally it was this one, it was just a picture, and then just like the chicken, I took it into Photoshop, made a transparency, saved it out, and just to save time, I'll just load the one that I've got. Okay, this one now. Open it. Okay, so it looks transparent, but what's wrong with it? Why doesn't it look like the texture? Too big. So where do I need to go to fix that? Yep, the UV editor. So if I go to the UV texture editor, now the complication here, how do I get rid of that? Go away. That's better. Okay, so the complication here is that this was originally a cube, right? So we've got this stuff. So what we need to do is first we need to identify what's been shown here. Okay, so if I go to that face, you can see that's that face covered. This is that face, etc., etc. The other faces from that cube are missing. Why are they missing here? Because I deleted them. Because I originally got a cube for this thing. So basically what I did is go create polygon cube and then deleted the top and the bottom, and that's why it's left that, yeah? So because I used the cube. So let's go back to this. So we need to sort of make sure we want the whole texture covered on one side completely. So this is where it can get a little bit tricky, but what you need to do is rearrange at least one of them because for all the other sides, I've just copied and pasted the same thing just to save time. So if I selected this face, you can see what part of the texture that's referring to in the UV editor. See, it's a small part of it. Okay, but what we need to do now is to somehow rearrange this so it fits, so the whole texture is covered. The way we do that, step one is to select the face that you want, which is this one. Step two is you go to UV planar mapping options. Select the direction that you want this projected. So in this case, it's the x-axis. If I select x-axis and go apply or project, you can sort of see, oops, zoom in a bit. That's what happens when you